Hello, in this video we will review the basics of the DDL statement create table. I have already created a new database called SQL Review _ company, and as you can see there are currently no tables in this database other than the SQL Server provided system tables. Now before you start creating tables using the create table statements, you should have already done some database design, meaning that you need to determine the needs of the end users to store and access that data. You should have designed the logical solution or the schema, and then also determine the physical design, which would include your SQL Server specific data types, other constraints, and so on. In this case, I'm going to create a table to store information about employees. The basic create table statement is create table, then followed by the table name, and in this case I will pluralize the table name. Between parentheses, we will then list the fields that will be included in the table. The list of fields requires us to specify both the field name and the data type. We can add optional information to that as well, and most commonly you would see the addition of the not null clause, which would allow us to say that these field values are required. So we will start by creating a simple table for employees, storing just the minimum amount of information. We will create a field called employee ID, which will be of type car9, maybe allowing us to store a social security number. We will have a last name, which we might use nvarchar25, first name nvarchar25, and we will include a date of birth, which will be the data type. I am going to, as a matter of habit, attempt to always close my SQL statements using semicolons. SQL Server technically does not require it, but it is a good practice for some database management systems that will require it, and in addition to that, it may also be helpful to separate your statements just for your own benefit. As statements become more complicated, you may find that certain keywords repeat for different statements, and having a semicolon will more clearly delimit the statement for your own purposes. We are now technically ready to execute this statement. We could create a table using these 4 fields and no other specifications. However, the employee ID will more than likely be the primary key, so we will start by adding a not null constraint to this field, meaning that we do not allow nulls to be in that field. And in addition to that, we can specify that this field has a constraint. I will now specify the constraint name, and usually primary key constraints are prefixed with pk_. I know that using underscores is less than desirable for typing purposes. You will very rarely ever type that constraint name, and in addition to that, pk_ is also the default way in SQL Server for creating those constraint names. And I will use the name of the table as the rest of the constraint name, because a table can only have one primary key. This would be this name of this constraint would be unique in the entire database. And now I'm specifying that the type of this constraint is primary key. In addition to that, I'm also not allowing null values for last name and for first name. There are other types of constraints detailed in chapter 2 of your textbook, including the check constraint and the unique constraint that you will need to be able to work with. However, we are now going to execute this statement, and it returns the message command completed successfully. What you will notice is that even though SQL Server tells us that this command was executed successfully, the tables node in our Object Explorer does not automatically update. However, we can right-click it and select Refresh, and it will now show us the employees table we just created, including the columns and the primary key. One last item to discuss regarding the creation of new tables. If a schema name is not specified, the table will be created in the user's default schema, and most often that would be the DBO schema. So that is why the full name of the table here is dbo.employees. That is in the format of schema name.table name. Thank you for watching this video.